To start off, I used Prezi, a visual presentation tool, to discuss the research into my genre and further subgenres. This helped me understand and determine which subgenre I wanted to explore and create. I used Adobe Photoshop to create my poster and website, as this helped me freely use the tools to bring my ideas to my final product. For my poster, as I had experience with the software, I went ahead and started off by using A4 canvas and placed my image on it first. I then applied all the enhancements to the image. To create my title, I first placed the typography into Photoshop. Then, using a brush and erasing away the colour with a low opacity, created the basis of the title. If I clicked a few times, very little was taken away, and this was how I got the scuffed and scratched effect to my title. Once this was done, I placed this into my poster and positioned it correctly. Following this, I then added in the billing block, followed by the pull quote which was placed above this. I then went on to adding the institution. My first institution was Dimension Films. As the original logo was black, this would not work as my poster was too dark. So to change this, I first used the magic wand tool to remove the background. Once I'd done this, I then used the bucket tool to change the colour of each letter to white. I then put it into my poster. Once this was there, I then positioned it into the way I wanted. Once this was in place, I then added the Twisted Pictures logo. This was easy as it had a black background, and so I could just place it on. Once the Twisted Pictures logo was in place, I then went on to add the date. To add the date, I just typed in what I had used and changed the font to match the rest. Once the date was in place, I then went to look for the Revolver logo on the internet. Once I found the Revolver logo, all I had to do was download it, and luckily, as it was white, I just had to place it. Once this was placed alongside with the rest of the logos, I then went on to the website. I decided to place the website underneath the date, as this was the most conventional and the most suitable place. Once this was done, I then moved on to the director. This was placed on top of the logo as it is seen on many other posters, and this gives the audience an idea of who the film's about. For the creation of my website, I used a canvas size of 720 pixels by 576 pixels, as this was the most appropriate and relevant for a widescreen film. Once I had this, I then started with the navigation bar. For the navigation bar, I placed a line in between each option, as this would space them out. For the typography of the options, I used a simple sans serif font, as this was as close to the genre. Following this, I then placed the trailer, which was the most predominant. Once the trailer was placed where I wanted it, I then placed in the title. This was also enlarged to let the audience know what the film is. Once the title was on, I then moved on to the social media, which was placed on the bottom left. There I included the Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr and YouTube accounts. Once the social media accounts were in place, I then moved on to adding the date on top of the trailer, as this was the most conventional place as the audience will see it. I then placed the options of where the audience can book the tickets using the three logos of the main cinemas. These cinemas were Showcase, View and Odeon. Once this was done, I then moved on to adding the audio on and off button. This was placed on the top right, which was the most conventional and ideal place for it. I then moved on to the bottom, where I placed all the legal information. Here I placed the terms of use, privacy policy and the credits. Once this was done, I then moved to the middle of the page, which included the institutional copyright information. I then moved on to placing the pull quote, which was placed above where you can book the cinemas. I placed this here because this was the most conventional place and it looked appropriate. I then moved on to the live Twitter feed, which was placed next to the trailer. To start off, I placed a red background and faded in using the brush tool. Once it was faded in, I then added the logo and wrote a live Twitter feed. Once this was there, I then placed live tweets from the target audience. Once this was done, I then added the two images at the top and bottom corners of the website,